Good.
Okay.
And you
So
switch the recording button, right?
yes, now we're recording. Recording started. So make a presenter.
Good. So
Uh,
good evening, everybody. Now you should see my screen. Nerius, is this correct?
yes, at least I do see your screen.
Okay, so then just let's hope that everybody does as well. So we're continuing our webinars, and last week we had an outstanding webinar by Ted Hutchin. The recording of his webinar is right now on the TOCPA site, and we've made the mail blast and the information also on TOC practitioners worldwide. Those who missed it when they presented it now have the chance to listen to the recording. And well, we are right now moving with you to another subject, to the subject of insights into handling people's yes but. The recording will also be available in a few days. So let's start the work. So that's about me. Well, about this webinar, we will look with you at 6 different areas that are relevant when we are speaking about yes buts, about the layers of resistance, and about handling people's disagreements and reservations. We will look with you at the common confusion between yes but that introduces a perceived potential outcome, perceived potential negative outcome, which is layer 4, and yes but that it introduces an obstacle, which is layer 5. Then we will see with you how to recognize from the response whether the person is concerned about the potential negative outcome or an obstacle. And we will look with you at the examples, and we will discuss in detail how to recognize what the person is speaking about. We will look with you at how to recognize whether the reservation is layer 5 or 4, or it only sounds as layer 5 or 4, while disguising layer 2, direction of the solution. Then we'll discuss with you briefly the difference between an obstacle and a moody, the difference between resistance and disagreement, and the common mistake of labeling categories of legitimate reservations as resistance or conflict. The last 3 points here I will only touch upon because I think over the last few months I wrote several blogs on these issues, and those blogs are in detail on TOC Expert. So let's have a look at yes and but. Now we will look at them separately, not as yes but yes is yes and but is but. Yes indicates that a person agrees to what was offered, even if it was just a point of view or position of the other person. It doesn't necessarily have to be a suggestion, an offer, an injection. It can be anything. It can be just a point of view. It can be a comment about something, absolutely not necessarily something that will request the other person for action. But erases what was said before. And the word erases is a pretty strong word, but actually, and I use the but this is what it is. I remember in one of the trainings on communication techniques and psychology of communication, our trainer gave us an example about but, the use of but. And she used exactly that sentence. She said, look, but erases what was said before. We looked at her. She looked back at us and said, look, my boyfriend told me, I love you, but you're a pain in the neck. I would have preferred him to say, you're a pain in the neck, but I love you. And I think that this is a very good example of the meaning of the but. Now just let's move to the meaning of the combination, yes, but. Yes, but means that we indicate that we have not a full agreement to what was offered, and we raise a reservation. And this reservation will be either to what was an explicit part of what was said, or what I assume was implied by what was said, or what the offer, in other words, what was said, may bring as the outcome, and what was not addressed in the offer itself, or was not fully addressed. It means that what was offered to us, we sense that there is some omission there. And we are afraid that this, what was omitted, will bring something negative. It doesn't mean that we think that a person omitted it on purpose, intentionally. It is just that we recognize that we cannot sell full yes, because full yes indicates that we agree completely. It's actually very interesting that just to operate with two words, yes or no, is not as simple as it is sometimes presented. Well, when people say, come on, this is a simple yes-no question. Questions yes-no are never simple, and especially if they are offered just as a multiple choice and there are only two choices, to say yes or to say no. Such situations when we are forced to say yes or no may lead to the situations when we are presented, just with a famous example. Did you stop beating your wife? Whether I say yes or no, both answers imply that I did beat my wife. So, therefore, the combination of yes, but is a very strong and a very caring tool that allows to continue communication in a constructive way. So in this sense, yes, but is a very positive tool because it says, yes, I agree to something of what you're saying or offering, but, and now this but erases the connotation of I agree completely. Because if we just say yes, it is a sign that we agree completely. That's why we say yes, but, and now the but erases the connotation of complete agreement, but still leaves the connotation of partial agreement because we did say yes. So, and then after but, we introduce our reservation. But is not the only signal to indicate only a partial agreement. There are other lexical means for that. At the same time, however, on the other hand, though, although, still, yet, nevertheless, these all are synonyms of but, and they all indicate that we have some agreement, but there is an aspect that we do not agree to. This is either because we know what we do not agree to, or because we sense that something was omitted and we want to make a reservation that if what was omitted is this and this, then we do not agree to those omitted elements. So, but and its synonyms give a clear signal that what was offered has been evaluated and a conclusion was made about acceptability of what was offered, or what was assumed, what was offered. Well, throughout the webinar, the material, I'm marking important elements of the message, either bold or red or capital letters. And this is because it is important to pay attention specifically to these elements, to these shades of the meaning, to these specific words. Actually, when we hear something directed to us, we always do an assessment of acceptability, even when the statement is not an explicit suggestion or request. I proceed from the knowledge that whenever something is said to us, or whenever there is an action that is directed towards us, it is only when the other party wants us to do something. They want information, they want help, they want us to respond in some certain way, which means that whenever there is a chain of words or an action that is directed to the person would certainly evaluate what the other party wants from them. In other words, when actions, words are directed towards us, for all practical reasons, we want to understand what is the person trying to make us do. In other words, consciously or subconsciously, we're trying to understand what was the purpose of what was said or done to us. So this is me. These are words and actions that are directed towards me. I want to check the purpose of the other side, of the other party. What for they are saying that or doing that? What do they want from me? I'm making the evaluation in terms of, is it good for me? Traditionally, in TOC, yes, but is linked to the layers of resistance to change. So the resistance are disagreement on what the problem is, disagreement with the direction of the solution, disagreement that the solution will bring the desired benefits, then the layers that are known as yes, but layers, fear that the solution will result in negative consequences, the risks that we assess, and obstacles to implementation seem to be impossible to overcome. These 5 layers have the tools in the set of the TOC thinking processes tools that we can handle every layer with a specific tool or set of tools. We will look at that a little bit later. There is a 6th layer, say yes and do nothing. Well, just we say that we cannot use a specific tool here because people agree with us, but they do nothing. The usual understanding is that if we meet such behavior with people, we have missed something on the previous layers. My experience also says that very often people say yes and do nothing if there is a very clear negative outcome that they see in doing what they are asked to do, in implementing the idea about which the decision has already been made. But because their interest, it is their personal negative outcome, it's their personal negative branch, which is actually against the interest of the system. People will not say that, you know, due to your idea now, I will not be enjoying the benefits as I used to enjoy them due to my position, whichever those benefits may be and whichever format this enjoyment takes. That's why people will say yes, but they will do nothing because they know that if they do, it will endanger just what they have right now. So it has concrete and very, very well understood negative consequences to them. Well, actually, I personally think that layer 4 is one of the most I'm not comfortable with the word powerful, but most probably this is the word. It's one of the strongest layers of resistance when people sense the negative consequences of what is done to them or what they are asked to do. So let's have a look at yes, but in another list. There is another list of the layers of resistance. There is a list that comprises 9 layers of resistance. So there are 2 versions of the layers of resistance in TOC. And layer 0 is there is no problem. Layer 1, disagreement on the problem. 2, the problem is out of my control. Layer 3, disagreement on the direction of the solution. 4, disagreement on the details of the solution. 5 is yes, but the solution has negative ramifications. The next layer, yes, but we can't implement the solution. The next layer, disagreement on the details of the implementation. And you know the solution holds risk. This is just what here is the link to the source just of this material. Just want to read this in more detail and just to get a more detailed clarification on each of the layers. This is the source. Well, my comments about those 8 layers of resistance as compared to the 6 layers of resistance, of this 9 layers of resistance, if we take layer 0 as well. That there is no contradiction between the two sets of layers of resistance, and it is just a different different level of detailization that is presented, and different way of looking at the way people disagree or raise reservations. Well, when people say there is no problem with its layer 0, we need to distinguish whether it is resistance or the category of legitimate reservation entity existence. We will look at that later today, and I also wrote not long ago a blog in TOC Expert about the confusion between resistance and category of legitimate reservations, or between disagreement and the category of legitimate reservation and resistance. The first one, disagreement on the problem, is the same as layer 1 with the 6 layers version. Layer 2, the problem is out of my control. So in my understanding, the problem is out of my control is the disagreement that something can be done about the problem. Then it is announcing a huge obstacle to implement a solution that has been announced. Again, we need to distinguish between resistance and category of legitimate reservation. If it's an obstacle, then it is covered in layer 5 in the 6 layers of resistance, and layer 6 and probably 7 is in this list. Disagreement on the direction of the solution is the same. Layer 4 here, disagreement on the details of the solution. This requires having a clear distinction of the border between the direction and the details. Layer 5 here is the same as layer 4 in the other list. Layer 6 here, yes, but we can't implement a solution. We can't implement means there are obstacles that we are aware of, which means layer 5 of the previous list that I showed. Disagreement on the details of the implementation. Details of the implementation is how, which is a part of the solution. It's details, and if details, it is, and if we see the obstacles there, so then it's again layer 5. And you know the solution holds risk, is perceived negative ramifications, so which means that they are included in the layer 4 of the previous list. So as we see, well, it does matter whether there are 6 layers or 9 layers. All the major elements of or areas where the reservations may appear, they are covered one way or the other. An important thing to realize, if we meet resistance, it means that we have already offered our solution. Resistance can happen only after, not before. The use of TP tools seems to be pretty straightforward when working with layers of resistance. And they are sort of repeat in the 2 stages of handling the change: the pre-decision stage and the post-decision stage. When we look at the pre-decision stage, it certainly starts with an idea. The change initiator brings the idea to the attention of relevant people, those who will decide whether to implement the change or not. That's a small green triangle to indicate it. Then there could be quite a lengthy process of evaluating change and raising reservations, concerns, suggestions, improvements. Improvements would be the suggestions, just what we need to add there. reservations and concerns. We'll be speaking about all types of risks and obstacles, and maybe the direction of the solution and the benefits. And after this period finishes, and it must finish one day, then the decision is made to implement the change or not. But if we're speaking about change implementation, it means the decision is made to implement the change. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the same form as it was at the moment when the idea was presented, but it certainly originates from that idea. And after the decision is made to implement the change, the post-decision stage starts. Actually, in the post-decision stage, there is no room anymore to discuss whether we should implement or not. These clouds have been taken away from people. There is no way to implement or not. The decision was made to implement, which means the only reservations that could be raised at that stage is actually not about whether this solution removes our problem. The decision has already made, the evaluation has already been done. Yes, it does remove. So this usually on the post-decision stage, it is a very important stage where those who will be implementing the change, actually the resources and the people whose work will be affected directly by the suggested change, that they see the obstacles and the negative outcomes, potential negative outcomes of the element, suggested element of the change to be implemented the way it is suggested. They usually do not fight against what to do. They may fight or resist how to do this, because they know their area usually better in more detail than whoever has been planning the change. And they see the specific elements. And by the resisting, which is what they're told to say, or let's put it this way, not just saying yes, but saying yes, but they indicate that there are elements that need to be taken into consideration. So in other words, something was omitted, something is missing in what was said to do. And this something, these elements need to be looked at and need to be incorporated into the suggested change. So, just well, as I said, the use of the TP tools is pretty straightforward when we are speaking about the layers, working with the layers of resistance, especially on the stage of evaluating change, pre-decision stage, but also on the post-decision stage. This right now, just a series of slides that we will look at, they are looking at the pre-decision stage. There are also just the same information is available, and it's possible to put this material the same way and to refer the tools to the layers of resistance for the post-decision stage. And you can read that in our book, in Godasco's book that we published in 2011 or 2010, I do not remember now, which is called Leading People Through Change. In my article that says that the title is What We Say is for Purpose, or What We're Doing Says for Purpose. So, well, I'm not going just to look right now in detail on those elements, but when we reach agreement on the problem, so to deal with the first layer of resistance, then we should have knowledge of the specific environment and the storyline. That Hutchin in his webinar gave an excellent explanation and very good examples. And he underlined the significance of knowing the storyline. That is just, well, I agree absolutely, just every word that said. In my practice and in my knowledge, actually people are speaking clouds and NBRs. They just when they start talking to you, and if you know how to listen, you're able to record their cloud and the assumption and the NBRs and the assumptions and the NBRs of the problem that they are describing or the concerns that we are speaking about. So anyway, it's the knowledge of a specific environment and storyline, any type of cloud, identifying assumptions, identifying performance measurements as low, recognizing the gap, identifying ODIs, building with the clouds, identifying core cloud, building CIT if required. Then the second and the third layers of resistance, disagreement, they are disagreeing on the direction of the solution and on the benefits. So we want certainly to reach the agreement on the direction of the solution and the agreement that the change will bring tangible benefits. So then it requires the detailed knowledge of the solution injections, what and how, their application in the specific environment, logic of how the injections bring relevant B's and C's, these are the desired effects, and high performance measurements. The fourth layer, reaching agreement that the change will not bring negative side effects, we need to record reservations in NVRs and identify NVR training injections. And reaching agreements that the change is doable, that all known obstacles can be removed. We need to identify obstacles, define intermediate objectives and deliverables, build IO map and implementation plan. So you can use the prerequisite tree or the achieving ambitious targets, which is a logical structure that is practically the same as the prerequisite tree. So it's pretty straightforward. Because this webinar is about yes, buts, so just we will be focusing on this box here that is looking at the layer 4 and 5 and the relevant tools. So the first question comes, when we hear yes, but, is it an NBR or an obstacle? The difference is meaningful as the tools and responses to use to deal with NBR and an obstacle are completely different. We saw this now. To deal with a potential negative outcome, we use an NBR, negative branch reservation. To deal with an obstacle, we use intermediate objectives and the prerequisite tree, achieving ambitious target. It is a practical question, which tool to use. That's why we need to be sure that we can recognize when people present us with a reservation, starting with the S bar, we can recognize whether it is an NBR or an obstacle. So now let's have a look at the difference. When does an obstacle happen and when does an NBR happen? Let's look at the timeline of implementing an injection. So this is today, this is now. This is where the decision is made about implementing an injection. Then there is a transition stage. Then, after the transition stage, when we are implementing the injection, the moment comes when we announce and we have very tangible signals in our reality that injection has been successfully implemented. From this moment, the injections start working in full, start bringing desired, expected desired effects, desired outcomes. So, and this is the period after the transition. So the obstacles and blockages, which are obstacles, happen before the injection is successfully implemented, because they are the obstacles on the way to have the injection successfully implemented. So obstacles and blockages are chronologically happening before the negative branch reservations that we present. NBRs happen after the injection is successfully implemented, in place, continuously operational, and brings expected desired effects. Why is there a confusion? It is because we speak about them, obstacles, blockages, and NBRs, in the present, even before the decision about implementing this injection has been made. So we are projecting how this idea that is offered right now will be behaving in the future and what will be happening. So generally, our yes but says, yes, I agree to part of what you've said, but there may be difficulties, there may be the struggle to implement it, and we're speaking about the transition, or yes, we will achieve what we want to achieve, and we will have the desired effects. But at the same time, parallel to the desired effects, we will have something negative. Well, when I'm giving an explanation about the difference between an NVR and an obstacle, I usually illustrate it with an example. Say, I have headache. In order to remove headache, I must take a painkiller. I take a painkiller, and in 15 minutes, my headache is gone. But I start feeling stomachache. I took the tablet, I took the painkiller, and I achieved what I wanted to achieve. So I have swallowed it, and I achieved what I wanted to achieve. The headache is gone, but my stomach doesn't appreciate having inside a painkiller, and I'm starting to have stomach aches. An obstacle, that's a clear NBR, but an obstacle would have been if the painkiller that I have to take is in the format of a tablet, and the tablet is so big that I cannot swallow it. I would love to take this painkiller, but I cannot swallow this big tablet. It just doesn't go through. Then I cannot implement this injection. I cannot have this tablet inside. Then it is an obstacle. So, when does this confusion happen? NVR or obstacle? We think and speak about them in the present and categorize them both as a future event. And this is correct. They both may happen in the future, or they both will happen in the future. So another reason why this confusion happens, we also categorize both of them under what may go wrong when we go as you suggest. And this is correct. They both speak about what may go wrong. So when we hear that from people, it is very difficult, if we're not trained, it is very difficult to hear whether they are speaking about something that is before the injection is implemented or after. Because what we hear that they speak about the future, and we hear that they speak about something that may go wrong. But both obstacle and NBR go under those categories. They both are from the future, and they're both from the area of what may go wrong. But then there is another area which is even more confusing. Sometimes we see a potential negative outcome in the transition stage that will create an obstacle to the implementation. How to qualify it and how to work with it. Is it an NBR or an obstacle? Let's have a look at the example. What do I mean by a potential negative outcome in the transition stage? Here. When we hear a reservation that starts with yes, but, or expresses a reservation or disagreement without a verbal signal, yes, but, the first thing that needs to be checked is, will the negative outcome happen after or before the injection is implemented and has started to bring expected desired outcomes? That's the first check, and this is a very strong check that helps to put the statement into the right category, obstacle or NBR. My people will not support this idea. Is it an NBR or an obstacle? This statement signals what negative for my system and myself I see if the decision is made to implement an idea. I will have, this is the meaning of my people will not support this idea. I will not be liked and supported anymore. I will have to put a lot of time and energy in trying to make them do what is expected of them. This will steal my time from other important things that I'm expected to do as a manager. Distracted by internal fights of position here. Double will not be able to present performance because will be distracted. So the decision to implement this idea. And that's important. Actually, the ability to distinguish between these three makes all the difference. Again, an NBR of implementing the idea, an NBR of the decision to implement the idea, or an obstacle to implement this idea. And we need to be very clear where on the injection implementation timeline these negatives appear. Let's see. This picture you've seen. So here is the reminder. If before the injection is implemented, it's an obstacle. If after, it is an NBR. So my people will not support this idea. Is it an NBR or an obstacle? We do not know. We do not know before we clarify the meaning of this statement, of this reservation. If the meaning is, I will have tension in the relationship with my people, when on the timeline it will happen. If it will happen in the transition stage, when I will have to push my people to implement this idea, the one that they do not support, and I will have tension, then it's an obstacle. It is an obstacle, but it is an obstacle that originates from the decision to implement the idea. And it's an NBR of the decision to implement the idea. It is not an NBR of an idea itself. It is an NBR of the decision to implement this idea. This, I will have tension in the relationship with my people, is an NBR, which is happening in this period, but it is not the NBR of the injection, implement the idea. It is the NBR of the injection, decide to implement the idea. Let's have a look at another example. I will not be liked and supported anymore. When? If it happens here, then it's an obstacle. If it happens after the injection is successfully implemented, it will be an NBR. My question is, why would I not be liked and supported anymore if the injection is successfully implemented? This is actually possible, only if people will not forgive me that I pushed them so hard to implement something which is bringing desired outcomes right now, which they should be enjoying. Otherwise, what was the point? So they are then enjoying the desired outcomes, but they cannot forgive me for being tough on them in the period of implementation. Then I will not be liked and supported anymore. That's possible, which means it can be an NBR or it can be an obstacle here. If the fact that I will not be liked and supported anymore will be preventing me to bring my people to successfully implement the injection. I will have to put a lot of time and energy in trying to make them do what is expected of them. If we check the timeline, that is clearly before it is successfully implemented, that is clearly an obstacle. This will steal my time from other important things that I'm expected to do as a manager. This is also an obstacle. It's here. It's unlikely that it will be here. It is here. When we see a potential negative outcome in the transition stage that will create an obstacle to the implementation, what tool to use? NVR or any of the tools that deal with obstacles. And they are intermediate objectives or ambitious target or requisite tree. Then another question, do we need both an NVR and a tool dealing with obstacles? And if yes, what is the sequence? Because if I return back to this will steal my time from other important things that I'm expected to do as a manager. So it is going to happen here. Yes, but if we will look at the statement, this statement indicates a negative outcome of the decision to make the change. So, or to implement the idea. So this is a negative, what is written in Lila is a negative outcome, is an NBR of the decision to implement the idea. But this NBR becomes an obstacle on the way to implement the idea. So there are two reservations within one statement. One is an NBR to the decision as the outcome of the decision, and it is an obstacle on the way to implement. Now, which tools to use and in which sequence? Do we need both? Do we need an NVR? Do we need to build an NVR? Or do we need to use intermediate objectives, and with which to start? When we speak about a perceived event in the transition stage, we deal with a clearly worded obstacle and should identify the intermediate objective for this obstacle. When this perceived negative is an NBR of the decision to implement the idea, and the outcome of this NBR is something that will create problems in the process of implementing the idea, then the intermediate objectives will be developed as the outcome of the supporting injection for the potential negative outcome. So actually, what is happening then, if we return back, this is the obstacle in the implementation, because this doesn't allow me to implement my injection successfully. But this obstacle, the nature of this obstacle is an NBR of the decision to make this change, to implement this idea. We have clearly worded the obstacle. Now we need to find the intermediate objective. Where from? If we know that this is a negative outcome, this is an NBR, it makes all sense to build the logical branch from the decision to implement this idea is taken, and the negative outcome, this will steal my time from other important things that I'm expected to do as a manager. My people will not support this idea, will probably be one step below this will steal my time from other important things, because it is clear that my people will not support this idea leads to this will steal my time from other important things. We need supporting assumptions, supporting arguments. We will need to check where on the backbone the positive, the decision is a positive thing. It was evaluated that this idea will bring good things to the system. We need to check where on the backbone the positive decision is turning into the negative that will eventually bring to the fact that my time will be stolen from other important things that I'm supposed to do as a manager. And then in this point where positive or neutral is turning into the negative, we need to find out all assumptions, all other conditions, all other necessary conditions that turn the positive or the neutral into the negative, and trim them. And this, the outcome of the trimming, what will result as the outcome of the trimming, is the intermediate objective for this obstacle. I do not feel comfortable with the intermediate objectives being worded as a mirror reflection of an obstacle. Like we don't have, and the intermediate objective is we have. I do not clearly see how that helps to sort out this obstacle when the intermediate objective is just a mirror reflection of positive wording of the negative that is expressed in the obstacle. But this is a completely whole big subject, and we're not taking this here. So, in our example, we need to understand and record the logic of how the decision to implement the idea, not the idea itself, will lead to the negative outcome. My people will not support the idea. But as I said, my people will not support the idea, will lead to the final meaning, to the meaning that is implied. And the meaning that is implied can be, I will not be liked, or it can be, it will take a lot of my time, or all this list that we looked at before, which will be the outcome of my people will not support the idea. Please pay attention that the NBR, decision to implement the idea, leading to my people will not support the idea, is not the same as the logical branch that will show the injection, implement the idea, leading to the negative outcome, my people will not support the idea. Such a logical branch can be called an NBR of implementing the injection, implement the idea, only if we perceive that even though your people will not support the idea, they will anyway successfully implement the idea, and after the injection is successfully implemented, they still will not support this idea, and there is something negative in that. In other words, their lack of support is not an obstacle, and it doesn't worry you, really. Was this what was really meant by this reservation? If yes, then that's possible. But we need to be sure that my people will not support the idea. Is it the second scenario, the second paragraph on the slide? Or is it what we discussed before? Is it in the transition period? However, if your concern is that their lack of support will lead to you becoming unpopular, unliked, burnt out as the result of the constant struggle with them in the implementation phase, while they will be successfully implementing the idea, then it is your NBR. And then it's the NBR of implementing the idea. It is possible. That's why I said we need to be very clear on what is presented as a reservation, whether it's an obstacle or an NBR. And if it's an NBR, then it is an NBR to what? It is possible that my people will not support the idea, but I will fight with them and struggle with them, and I will make them successfully implement the idea, but as a result of that, I will not be liked. Then the meaning that we looked at the beginning, that my people will not support the idea, the next step is I will not be liked, is an NBR of implementing the idea. Because this is what is going to happen. You will be happy that the idea was implemented and the desired outcomes are achieved, and you will be unhappy because you will not be liked, you will not be popular, you will be burnt out. So now let's have a look at another area. Is what we hear an NBR or an obstacle or a disguise for layer 2? Layer 2 is disagreement with the direction of solution, or on the direction of solution, actually. Is it possible that when people say yes, but, and carry on with the content that indicates an NBR or an obstacle, they, in fact, disagree on the direction of the solution and bring their reservations as the arguments why the direction of the solution is not good? In other words, it's not about really negative outcomes. It's not about obstacles. It is, no, it's about them. But the focus is not layer 4 and layer 5. The focus is the direction of the solution. Is that possible? So that when people are trying to tell you that the direction of the solution risks are dangerous, they will be indicating an NBR. Or if the people are trying to tell you that the direction of the solution is not good because it is difficult or expensive, too difficult or expensive, then it is an obstacle. They will be speaking about an obstacle. But is it the focus of their interest, obstacle or direction of the solution? And the focus of their disagreement, negative outcome or direction of the solution? There are two areas there. How to recognize that yes, but signals that the people have the disagreement with the direction of the solution. And I'm sorry, so it's a mess on the text. How to recognize that yes, but signals that, or signals about the disagreement with the direction of the solution. And then which tools to use. This is again what we have to do. We have to listen very carefully to what people are saying, and we have to keep in mind that when people are raising an NBR or when people are raising an obstacle, and we are able to recognize that by putting this on the timeline, we need to go back one way or the other to our direction of the solution and to check whether there is something in the direction of the solution that can be changed or can be improved in order to remove those reservations. But again, the way to go through that is certainly to use the tool, the logical structure, the logical branch of the NBR, and to find out all the obstacles that are presented, that are saying that the solution is too difficult or too expensive to realize. Actually, expensive can also be an NBR, not necessarily an obstacle. Now let's have a look at the difference between an obstacle and a NUDI. From the point of view of the global meaning, a NUDI is an obstacle to achieving the desired performance level of the system. Then is it the same? No. When we speak about the difference between an obstacle and a NUDI and still see thinking processes elements, there are four aspects to it. The essence of each of these two TP tools, what they are about, what is their core, their wording, the destiny of the notion recorded in an obstacle versus a NUDI. Are they going to disappear or can they stay? Can this notion stay? And the frequent confusion between a NUDI of the system and an obstacle to the implementation of the solution to remove the system UDIs. You see, we again getting back to an obstacle to the implementation, to the transition stage. The essence of a NUDI and an obstacle as TP elements. An obstacle, an intermediate objective, they go together. As elements of TP, they are elements of the secondary layer. An obstacle is a derivative of the solution. We can identify an obstacle or obstacles to a specific solution only after we have this solution and we have evaluated it, we have assessed it, and we see the obstacles to implement the solution. Hence, we start speaking about an obstacle and do the logical work with it after we have developed the solution to the problem. And an intermediate objective is a derivative of an obstacle. It is actually the next layer, logical layer. A NUDI. We work with a NUDI as an element of TP before we have a solution to the problem. An UDI is a loud signal of the problem in the system. An UDI is what everybody knows and speaks about. Everybody has taken steps to sort it out. But this problem, this UDI, keeps on reappearing, and there is no known solution, not on the surface, of how to stop the UDI from reappearing. Because if we had known this solution, we would have applied this solution, and this UDI would have been gone, and it's not. It keeps on staying in the system, or it keeps on reappearing in the system. Again, an obstacle is a derivative of the solution, developed solution, and an UDI is the raw material from which we will be deriving the solution. So that's an essence of an UDI and an obstacle as TP elements. So the second area of the difference between an obstacle and an UDI. Okay, so this is just for the reference. What is an UDI? And an UDI is a statement that should, at the same time, satisfy the listed 10 rules. Just for us to qualify the statement as an UDI, the statement should be, at the same time, should be fitting within these 10 rules. So the wording. The second area of the difference is the wording. An obstacle is anything that blocks an implementation of an idea. The wording of an obstacle is usually of the nature of don't have, won't get, or don't know. The implied solution for the situation is obvious and usually has a mirror reflection wording. Have received, have learned. As I said, I do not find this mirror wording helpful. But this is what we quite often see when people offer intermediate objectives for the obstacles. The wording of an obstacle implies a solution. This is what makes the clear-cut difference between an obstacle and an UDI, because an UDI must not be a hidden solution. It is rule 8 of the 10 UDI rules above. The wording of the following examples implies a solution. These statements can be treated as obstacles, but not as UDIs. Let's see. We do not have the specifications. Okay, so the solution is clear. Get the specifications from somebody who certainly has them. Our machines are old. Okay, the solution is implied. Buy new machines or reject orders that cannot be properly produced on these old machines, or find subcontractors with the new machines and pass over these orders to them. Another obstacle, our server room is too small. The solution is implied. Move the server room to a bigger room. Or we do not have enough qualified personnel. Quite obvious solutions. Train personnel, hire new personnel that have all required qualifications, and so on. These statements are not UDIs. They cannot be accepted as UDIs because they have a hidden, implied solution in their wording. It's the wording. The third area, the destiny of the notion recorded in an obstacle versus an UDI. There's another clear cut between an obstacle and an UDI. A notion that has created an obstacle may stay, while an UDI must not stay. It must be removed. If we find a way to prevent what blocks us now from blocking us from achieving what we want, then it stops being an obstacle while still being there. It is like with a mountain. A mountain right now blocks the way that we need to get from point A to point E. There is a mountain on our way. It is certainly an obstacle to achieve the desired outcome, to get to a certain point. However, to remove this blockage, one doesn't have to remove the mountain. The mountain may stay. We may dig a tunnel. We may have the road around the mountain. It's an obstacle. We can take actions that will stop this obstacle from blocking what we want to achieve, while the obstacle itself will stay. That's not about an UDI. The UDI must not stay. The UDI must be removed. And the fourth area, a frequent confusion between an UDI of the system and an obstacle to the implementation of the solution to remove the system UDIs. Statements of the type, top management do not have time to properly monitor the implementation, is not an UDI. It is an obstacle to implement the solution. People that are supposed to be doing tasks on integrating the new system are too busy with their everyday work. That's not an UDI. This is an obstacle to the implementation of the solution. The client is not doing its share of work. It's not an UDI. Yes, it is persistent. Yes, it is consistent. It is a consistent obstacle. It's a mountain. The mountain is also persistent and consistent. It just sits there. The fact that it keeps on reappearing doesn't make it an obstacle. An UDI, I'm sorry, doesn't make it an UDI. It is an obstacle in the implementation phase. The budget that the client has is not enough to give them the needed service, and so on. They are all obstacles. And these are the obstacles that a consultant or the manager faces in the implementation. The difference between resistance and disagreement, that's the last area that we will look at. Layers of resistance is a tool to work with resistance to a suggested change and not with any disagreement. That's important. Layers of resistance and yes and but as the signals for the layer 4 and 5 are the tools to work with resistance to a suggested change and not with any disagreement. So my recommendation before suggesting, using, or referring to layers of resistance, check if the situation is about a suggested solution to a problem, or it can be just a conversation about something. I wrote recently a blog on this subject. And one of the examples that I was giving there, that even a very explicit no is not an example of the resistance. Well, I was giving an example like, would you like tea? And my answer is no, I'm not resisting. Just I was asked if I would like something, and I'm giving them the information that I do not want this. So typical mistakes: confusion of entity existence, category of legitimate reservations with resistance and conflict. That is an important area, and I wrote a blog on that as well. And I'm saying that when people say no, or even when people say yes, but this is not necessarily the signal that the people resist to something. They may say, yes, I did say that, but I said that, and yes, I did speak about that, but I didn't say it this way. Then yes, but will certainly not be the indicator of layer 4 or layer 5. And then entity existence, then when people say no, this is not what was said, what was claimed, what is written. It is not a resistance, and it's certainly not a conflict. It is that people are using the category of legitimate reservations that deals with entity existence. They go and check, and when they find that it does not correspond, the reality does not correspond to what is said about this reality, they are using entity existence, category of legitimate reservations to indicate that what was said or what is presented is not what it is in reality. It's not resistance. The second typical mistake, lack of understanding that layers of resistance deal with disagreeing with the suggested solution to a problem and not just with any no in any context. We'll discuss that. And confusion of inability to produce desired behavior with resistance. Sometimes when we do not see the desired behavior, or when we can't get the agreement of the people to do what we ask them to do, we tend to treat it as the resistance to change. If you look into that, it's sometimes clear that people say no because they do not have capability, they don't have the skills, they don't have the knowledge to do what they are expected to do. So here it is. So now just the questions, please. Nerius?
Yes, thank you, Jelena. And do we have the questions? We had several comments regarding some minor typos.
Yes, there are. Sorry about that. Yes.
So, if anybody wants to ask the question, you should see the tab.
Questions box. Question.
Yeah, question box.
Okay.
Yes, we have the question from Alejandro. Yeah, he's asking, the last difference between resistance and the layers of resistance is quite relevant. Can you elaborate on those mistakes more?
Yes, between probably the difference between disagreement and layers of resistance. Alejandro, did you mean that?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So I understand that then the question is about these typical mistakes. Is that correct, Alejandro? Just let me check now.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So again, just as I'm saying, well, there is a blog that I wrote recently about that, and it gives examples and it looks into that and just into the real detail. Well, what is confusion of entity existence category of legitimate reservation and resistance? When people say no, this is not correct, or when people say no, I didn't say that, or when people say no, this is not what was written, or people say no, we did not, you did not send us this shipment, or we did not receive this shipment, this is not resistance, and it is not a conflict. It is that people are using entity existence category of legitimate reservations. Something has been told them. Well, I was told you said this and this. If it doesn't feel to me that this is what I could have said, I will go back to the exchange that the person refers to, and I will look at what I specifically said. And if I find there that what the person said that I had said is not what I had said, then I am using the category of legitimate reservations, which is dealing with entity existence. What the person presented to me is an entity. If I am not sure that this entity exists, I will recheck it if I have the means to recheck it. And if I recheck it, and if I am convinced, if I clearly see, if I have the evidence that that entity that was presented as existing does not exist, my answer will be no. Or my answer will be yes, I spoke about this subject, but no, I didn't say what you said I had said. This is not a resistance, because resistance, when we refer to the word resistance in the context of layers of resistance, it is resistant to a change, resistance to a suggested idea. Okay, so this is first mistake. Alejandro, are you okay with that? Alejandro, any answer?
Well, yes, he's okay.
Okay. So the second typical mistake is exactly what I said, that we sometimes forget that layers of resistance deal with the disagreeing with the suggested solution to the problem, not just with any no. I just brought the example. My saying no does not mean that it is resistance. If I use existence, entity existence, category of legitimate reservations, And if what the person said was not a suggested solution, then we cannot refer it to the layers of resistance. And the third one, if you tell me, please, I don't know, ride this horse and take this cart from this point to that point, I will certainly say no, because I do not know how to ride a horse. This is not resistance. This is, I'm signaling about my inability to produce desired behavior. Is that okay? Nerius?
Jelena, says Alejandro, writes Alejandro. So we have another question. Yes, we have from Adrian. Greetings, Jelena. Thank you about the difference between edu, and probably and obstacles, just like 10 rules of UDIs. So not edu, probably it meant UDIs.
UDIs.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are there similar rules for obstacles?
No, there are not. So my answer, no, they're not. Just what the obstacles are. Well, I have outlined now in this material, and I have explained what is the essence of an obstacle.
Okay, then we have another question. Imagine you are the one with the yes but. How do you deal with the person who has a plan and does not see your yes but? The question by Jeffrey.
Does not see means does not agree to my yes but.
Or doesn't listen to your yes but.
Well, it depends on my position in the system. If I'm a resource that is supposed to fulfill my job, and this does not, this is not outside what I'm told to do, is not outside the boundaries of what I'm doing, and this is not unethical by all my standards and by the standards of the system, then I am supposed to, if I have the chance to escalate it higher, if I see that the negative branch is really severe, then it is my responsibility to escalate this issue higher. If it is an obstacle, I will not be able to do it, because when I come to somebody who offer the idea and I say, raise a reservation about an obstacle, I'm signaling that I need help. Otherwise, it would be no sense for me to come and talk about that. We speak about a reservation only when we are unable to remove the obstacle ourselves, or to prevent the negative outcome ourselves. Otherwise, if I can do this, why I would be speaking about that? So then I will do my best to keep on doing my work. If it's, imagine that it's me. Well, I will not sabotage. Would people sabotage? Most probably some of them would and some of them would not. But the main thing is that very often when I raise a reservation, when the time is coming when I need to do this, then I cannot do this. If it's an obstacle, I certainly cannot do this. If it's a negative branch reservation, if I see a severe negative outcome, I will escalate first. And then if it is repeated to me that this is what I should be doing, and this is in my job area, then yes, I have two options, either to do it or to leave.
Okay, thank you. And then we have the question from Marcus. Well, probably he means all this thinking, and he asks, do you think about all this during the conversation, or is this done once you write down some notes?
Oh no, this is online. It's online. You do the assessment online. It is like you listen in order to hear. There are just when people speak, they give the signals by what they're saying, by how they're saying, and this assessment goes online. It goes during the conversation. That's online. My response depends on how I decoded what the person said.
Okay, thanks. And Jorge Ramirez, he's asking, if you made a mistake identifying whether it's an obstacle, an MBR or UD, wouldn't it be clear during the implementation so it will be corrected then? So what are the real benefits to putting a lot of effort in identifying the correctness of the category?
Well, if you have the solution, if you do not need the tools to develop the solution to the reservation that is presented to you, then no difference if you have the solution. But well, I'm a bit confused because if the decision, if we are on the pre-decision stage, if the decision will depend whether we have identified correctly the whether they are obstacles or NBRs, and what is the magnitude of NBR and what is the magnitude of an obstacle, then when it pops up in the period of implementation or after, it can be pretty painful. So yes, in the stage of the design, I would prefer to know the NBRs and the obstacles, absolutely. Whether to go through, well, I'm a bit confused because the only actually tool how to identify whether it's an NBR or an obstacle, it is to put it against the timeline. And this is usually a matter of a second that you think, will it be before or after the injection is implemented? That's the only question that needs to be asked. This is how you know whether it's an obstacle or an NBR. So that's why it's not huge effort and certainly doesn't take time. But in order to find the solution to that, then yes, if you know which tools to use, so, and you do not need to, if you just know that it is a reservation and you know that this reservation needs to be dealt with, then if you know which tools to use, then there is certainly no difference. Then you don't have to take this second and think, is it an obstacle or is it an NBR? If you know if you know how to develop the solution, if you know where from to take the solution, and this can be if you really have experience and whatever is said, you have met it already, so you can pull it out of of your portfolio of answers. If you can recognize the patterns, if you have seen enough patterns before, and you know the answer. But this needs to be dealt before, not during. At least you should know. Otherwise, this is exactly what is happening just in the project management when we are in the middle of the project and when we find out that actually we didn't think about this and we didn't think about that. So, and absence of that becomes an obstacle to proceed, and then it's too expensive and to sort it out, and it's sometimes, quite often actually, this delays the project. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I think that's it. There was some clarification from Alejandro, but probably we'll answer them in writing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so thank you for participants, for the questions, for the comments. Thank you, Jelena. for such a valuable insights. And I think everybody who listened live and who will be listening recording, they will get the real insights and benefits. And I think let's call it the end of the webinars, and the recording will be published quite soon on the TOCPA website.
Absolutely.
Yes, and please check the other upcoming webinars. We have some great webinars on, well, coming.
On the 31st, so yeah, 31st of October, it will be this webinar about the need for the analytical abilities. So thank you to everybody. Thanks for participating. Thanks for the questions. Marius, many thanks again for providing the platform and for being there. And see everybody next time.
Yeah, thank you, and see you next time.